I mean, I think whenever somebody terminates an employee, that's probably the biggest risk that they have, to make sure that they can defend that if challenged. And a lot of times, small companies, they'll terminate people and it doesn't come back to haunt them. But when it does, it can cost them $50,000, $100,000 because they terminated somebody for an illegal, at least they're usually not terminating them for an illegal reason, but the terminated employee can end up filing an EEOC charge or finding an attorney that ends up taking the small company to court, and they just didn't have all their ducks in a row to really be able to defend that.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.
Welcome back to another episode of the Business After Hours podcast. Here with my co-host Jared and our guest Tom. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm great.
Friday.
It's Friday.
It's Friday.
That's right. Third best day of the week.
Yes, it is.
Right. The other two are Saturday and Sunday. Well, Tom, why don't you get us started and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I've been in HR my entire career for past 30 plus years. After I graduated from business school, I worked for a lot of big companies, BP Amoco, Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, several other companies, all in HR. I've been the head of HR of business units that were $1 billion in sales and 3,000 employees. I was the chief people officer of a company called Potter Electric, and now I work for Preferred CFO, and we do outsourced finance, accounting, HR, and payroll work for small companies, and I manage the HR and payroll side of the business.
Now, for what you guys are, since you guys outsource, what size company is it? Dollar amount, people amount that do you recommend?
Yeah, so generally we're working with companies that are less than 100 employees, less than 15 million in revenue, where it really doesn't make sense for them to go hire a full-time HR manager. They're just too small, and we're just a much cheaper option. Where you get the same level of service, but a fractional HR manager, an HR leader to help you manage your business.
So when we're talking like fractional, and we see this a lot, everybody's now fractional, CFOs, CEOs, can you talk more about the benefits of being a fractional or using fractional?
Yeah. So I mean, probably the biggest benefit is it's cheaper. Because rather than hiring a full-time person and paying them benefits and all of that kind of stuff, you can get a really seasoned HR leader that has 20 plus years of experience, and can satisfy your business, and they're available 24/7. But when you're a company with less than 100 employees, you just probably don't have 40 hours a week worth of work for them. And so you can have somebody that's available, 15, 20 hours a week or whatever, and can take care of all of your HR and payroll needs, but just for much less expensive than hiring somebody full time.
What advice would you give people that are looking for, CFOs, CHOs, and those fractional, like what should we be looking at for picking those experienced people?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you definitely want to go with an organization where somebody has a lot of experience, and knows what you don't know. What I see a lot of business owners and CEOs of small companies, it's a tendency to try and do everything yourself.
Sure.
And a lot of times you just don't know what you don't know. And so if you don't think you're an expert in finance, accounting, HR, or payroll, you're probably right. And your business is going to run a lot better if you have somebody who is an expert in those areas, because it can be really costly if you don't do things right
Sure.
in the HR space. I mean, there's companies that end up with big fines or lawsuits because they didn't do things right. We had a company that's been a client of ours for about a year, and when they hired us, they were using Paychex, a very reputable payroll firm, and who has great software. But if you don't know what to look for, they're not knocking on your door and saying, "Hey, look, you didn't do this right." And so we got in there and we were like, "Oh, guess what, guys? They have employees. They're a totally remote company, have about 100 employees, and they're spread throughout a bunch of different states. And you guys didn't jump through the hoops that you needed to. You haven't paid payroll taxes in about half of these states for the last year." And so we've cleaned that up for them, and it ended up costing them more money than if they had done it right. But it's that kind of stuff that you need to know. You need somebody who's been there, done that, knows what they're doing to make sure that you don't end up in trouble down the road.
Speaking of trouble, what are some cleanup jobs that you've seen that should have been caught earlier? Give some examples of some things that business owners don't know what they don't know, right? I mean, like you had said. So what are some areas that you've seen, like a common recurrence, that might be some pitfalls that some people are falling into that don't know?
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever somebody terminates an employee, that's probably the biggest risk that they have, to make sure that they can defend that if challenged. And a lot of times, small companies, they'll terminate people and it doesn't come back to haunt them. But when it does, it can cost them $50,000, $100,000 because they terminated somebody for an illegal, at least they're usually not terminating them for an illegal reason, but the terminated employee can end up filing an EEOC charge or finding an attorney that ends up taking the small company to court, and they just didn't have all their ducks in a row to really be able to defend that. And so, we've seen, and that's one of the times when sometimes companies are calling us because they have, ended up in a lawsuit or ended up with a EEOC charge or something else, and it ends up costing them some money. Hiring employees as independent contractors is another one that we see, and that probably doesn't fit the requirement for an independent contractor, and the Department of Labor or the IRS or somebody else has come after a small business because they have a bunch of employees that they've been treating as independent contractors, but it really doesn't meet that. And usually where it comes up is when one of those independent contractors either has a workers' comp claim or goes and files for unemployment after the company lets them go, and all of a sudden they're now flagged, and they have some government entities coming in and saying, "Let's take a look at this," and they end up with some fines around that.
No. We're talking about like firing people, being here in Texas, we hear, oh, it's an at-will state, right? So that it doesn't like, is it still important to think about how you fire somebody, even in like states like Texas where, people have this false sense of confidence?
Yeah. And actually every state in the country, except for Montana, is an at-will state. However, you can terminate somebody unless they allege that you're discriminating them based on their race, sex, age, the fact that they were pregnant, the fact that they had a whistleblower complaint, and then a lot of states have a lot of different reasons on why it's illegal to fire somebody. So they're an at-will state, but if somebody can allege that, no, the reason you fired me was because you're discriminating against me for one reason or another, that's when people end up, paying some money.
Because I know, like in Michigan, they just passed a law that passed that even though it's an at-will state, like you said, but an employee can call in or no call, no show for 3 days in a row and can't be fired for it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that particular law, but it happens all the time
Sure.
where somebody says, no, the real reason you terminated me was because of my gender or my race, or my age, and those are the most common, but there's certainly a lot of other ones, or because I'm pregnant, or because I took time off after the birth of my child, even as a man. I mean,
Right.
that's another illegal reason to terminate somebody. The Family Medical Leave Act provides people the ability to take 12 weeks off, regardless of their gender, after the birth of a child or the adoption of a
The
child.
adoption rate,
So
right.
there's all these laws that that people need to be familiar with, and I'm personally just a big believer in putting together a small severance agreement whenever you terminate somebody. And you don't need to pay them a lot of money, a week, or two, or whatever, and most people will sign that. But if you have a properly written severance agreement and you pay somebody a week or two of pay to sign the severance agreement, you can virtually eliminate the legal risk. And so, and then before you terminate somebody, you ought to really assess, is there a legal risk? And that's where I think it's always safer to, kind of provide, before you terminate somebody, do a written warning, kind of outlining, hey, look, your performance isn't what it needs to be. If you don't improve, we're going to terminate you. Well, if you have one or two written warnings, and then you terminate them, that also puts you in a much better legal position. But sometimes, people, managers are just like, I can't stand it another moment. I need to terminate them. Okay, well, let's do a severance agreement. You're taking a little bit of risk, but odds are most people will sign a severance agreement. Maybe it needs to be, there might be a little negotiations on the amount of money they want, but it's usually a much smaller amount than it will be if they go shop around, find a lawyer who's now, going to be taking it on with the 1/3 contingency, and the price tag goes up.
Right.
Now, you talked about 1099 employees, and I know just recently, I feel like Texas just changed or maybe it was the whole United States
And it
just
was all
changed the way, it's classified as 1099. Can you kind of discuss some of that and like what
Sure.
would, justify 1099 versus an employee?
Yeah. So, for the most part, if they are only working for the company, one company, and they look like and act like every other, like an employee, you're probably safer to just put them on as a W-2 employee. It really, it'll cost you a little more in taxes, which is why the government likes to make sure that they're W-2 employees instead of 1099, because you're going to pay half of their FICA, you're going to have unemployment tax, and you're going to have workers' comp tax, or workers' comp that you provide for them. But a true 1099 employee is somebody who generally is working for multiple companies, has a lot of flexibility in what they get done for you, but that you're not telling them, yeah, I need you to show up at 8 o'clock, and need you to stay till 5, and I need you to do these specific things in these specific ways. I mean, 1099 employees are more, no, I want you to go do this project. How you do it, whether or not you end up making money on the project, is different. But if you're really paying somebody by the hour or by the time, most of the time they're probably not a 1099 employee.
And my understanding is if you're 1099, you really kind of give up a lot of control because they're really just a subcontractor at that point, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah,
You can't mandate shifts and stuff like that.
That's right. Yeah, you're generally saying, hey, I want you to do this project, how much time it takes you, and but I'm paying you X amount for this project, go do it, and or a just kind of a salesperson that's getting paid, kind of straight commission.
Right.
Don't really care how you do it or what you do or how long it takes you, but I'm going to pay you X amount for each sale. Something like that, is more defensible as a 1099 employee.
And do they fall under the same restrictions and equal opportunity employment
No,
laws?
no, they don't.
So you can let them go at any time?
Yeah. So then it's just much. Yeah. I mean, they don't fall under the same laws because they're not an employee. They're really an independent contractor.
Right. Okay.
So they don't fall under the same laws, which is another reason why the government wants to make sure that if they really are an employee and you're telling them, paying them by the hour and telling them what to do and where to show up, that's not a 1099 independent contractor.
Correct. Now, what's the smallest, in your expertise, the smallest size company that they should maybe start considering someone like yourself as an HR consultant to come in?
Well, I mean, I think once you hire your first employee, you need somebody who knows what they're doing. And so we've got clients that have, 3 employees. Okay. And of course, what we're charging them is way less than the company that has 100 employees, but if you know what you're doing in HR, then you probably don't need any help. But if you really are like, hey, I've got questions, I'm not quite so sure. Well, you probably want somebody who can, kind of help you. So you have somebody to call. All right, I'm going to hire somebody, or hey, it's not working out, I'm going to fire somebody, or whatever. It's probably good to start once you've hired an employee, because you got to pay them and you got to make sure that you're doing everything correctly. Certainly, a company with 100 employees, well, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff with them, maybe training, employee engagement surveys. There's other stuff that we may do for an employer that has 100 employees that they may want, versus somebody that just has 1 or 2 or 3 employees.
So what is like a week look like for a fractional CFO or CH, what does that look like for them?
Yeah. So, I mean, typically somebody working for us full time might have, 3 or 4 different companies that they're working with. And so, they're interacting with those managers, helping them as they hire people, helping them with their payroll, helping them as they, maybe have some different initiatives around training and development. And so that fractional HR manager it's a pretty similar day to an HR manager that's working for one company. It's just that they're working with 3 or 4 different companies.
That's great.
And so are you kind of more of a consultant at that point of an HR, or are you like?
No, I mean, I think we're a fully embedded, HR manager.
Okay.
The only difference is that we're working with companies that probably can't afford hiring a full-time HR manager.
Or might not make sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, doesn't make sense. If a company can get everything that they need from a HR manager on a fractional basis, so it's costing them less, why would they hire a full-time HR manager?
Right. So 100 employees is kind of that mark where you.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the business to some extent, but for the most part, if a company with less than 100 employees has a full-time HR manager, they're probably paying more than they need to.
Okay. What's a misconception that people have for HR?
I mean, I think a lot of people think that maybe they don't need it. And, and they don't need it until they do, until they've made a mistake and it's ended up costing them a bunch of money. And then another attribute and another thing that we do, and a part of our practice that we do even for really big companies, is help them recruit. So I think most people, all right, great, you go post a job on Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever, and if you get the candidate that you want from that job posting, you probably don't need a lot of help. But where you need the help is, I posted it on all the job boards. I haven't been able to fill the job. Now what do I do? And that's another thing that we do really well. And what we do is, we go on the LinkedIn database, we go on other databases, we reach out to, hundreds, if not thousands of candidates, most of whom are not looking for a job. So that's why you didn't get their resume, is they're not going out on the job boards and applying for jobs. But when we contact them and sell them on the job, they're like, oh yeah, all right, I might be interested. And, and so you can, that's really the next best approach if you haven't been able to find it through your traditional means. And we're really good at searching all those databases, reaching out to candidates and selling them on at least talking to the company about their opportunity. And you can often find some really good candidates. And a lot of times some of your best candidates are people that aren't looking for a job. Right. And how do you reach out and entice them to consider a job?
Right. And what other ways would an HR person be outside of hiring and firing and whatnot?
Well, training and developing managers. So I think one of the real values of having an HR manager embedded in your business is they can be a great coach to the CEO and the other leaders in the company. So one of the things that we do that I think is really, really valuable is, as we're attending staff meetings and developing relationships with people, that helps people have somebody to confide in, that we can then help coach the leaders on how they can be better. What are some of the things that people are frustrated with? And then we also, as a very effective tool, we'll go do a employee engagement survey with companies. And it's a totally anonymous survey. We have benchmarking data that we can really help companies understand the results. And then that provides a great avenue to then work with the leaders as well as other groups in the company on, all right, here's really what some things are that we need to change to really help improve the engagement of your employees and the productivity of your employees and help you reduce turnover. That's one of the avenues. And then we also, with companies, really spend a lot of time helping companies understand why people are leaving and interview people who are leaving the company, and put together plans to help decrease turnover. It's funny. We had, there was a company I worked with that was having a lot of turnover in their manufacturing plant. And, we went and interviewed people and really helping them figure out, well, what's driving this turnover? And one of the biggest drivers in this specific case was people were leaving for more money. And they're like, yeah, but we just can't afford to pay. We know they're leaving for more money, but we can't afford to pay more. Well, let's look at that. And so I worked with some of their engineers and some of their folks and said, look, what is the cost of turnover in this manufacturing plant? And one of there were several big costs of turnover. One of it was the learning curve. It took them 3 months before the person was fully productive. Their first week, they were maybe only producing 30% of what somebody who had been around for a year or two was producing. And then the second week, maybe it was 40%. And then maybe it was 60%. And so if you just add up, because you're paying them like they're fully productive, if you add up the unproductive time in the first 3 months, it added up to a lot of money. And then
Sure.
they were making some quality errors, that the new hires were producing some defects that people who were there for a year or more weren't. So we added all of that up and said, you know what? You can give everybody a 15% increase in pay. We also went out and surveyed similar companies and tried to, make an estimate on just that one factor of giving people a 15% increase in pay. What do we think that will reduce your turnover to? And they actually saved money.
Wow.
Gave people a 15% increase in pay, but saved money. So you can definitely go broke saving money, and investing. You can do that. And then there were other factors that we found out. We found a couple managers that weren't the best managers. So we gave them some coaching and feedback. Hey, here's some anonymous feedback from people who work for you on what you're doing that has caused them to leave the company. And we really helped them decrease their turnover and ended up saving a bunch of money by doing that.
Now, do you help with like SOPs as well, and manual writing and that kind of thing?
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the things that we definitely do for every client is most of our clients don't have an employee handbook, but we'll help them put together an employee handbook. Then we'll put in a performance review process. And part of that is having every employee really establish, what are my goals and objectives? And you start with kind of, all right, let's define for the company, what are the 4 or 5 things that are the metrics that we can measure that really tell us as a company whether or not we're successful. And then, all right, once we identify those are the 4 or 5 metrics, now for every person reporting to the CEO, what are the 4 or 5 metrics for your organization that help you know whether or not you're successful? And then basically cascade that down to where every employee has the 4 or 5 metrics that I know whether or not I'm being successful, and they should tie in all the way up. And then we should have performance reviews that evaluate people on those 4 or 5 metrics. But it's also important, I think, to measure people on what they're accomplishing, but it's equally important to measure on how you're accomplishing that.
Right.
And that's where we help companies identify their mission, their vision, and their values. And their values should really help people understand how you should accomplish your job in this company, and measuring people on, are you living those values, and are you accomplishing your job the way that we want you to accomplish your job?
Right. Well, Tom, it's been great having you on. Conversation went quick. But I do want to end with this, because I got a question that so obviously not all HRs or HR people are the same, right? What
Sure.
sets you apart from others?
I think it's really going in, understanding the goals and objectives of the business, and then putting in place all of the HR processes that will help that company accomplish their goals and objectives.
Awesome.
That's great.
Awesome. Jared, did you have anything else?
No, I mean, I think you've put a really good insight into the importance of needing HR, and being, a smaller company going to you for your services, and it being critical for their business. So thanks for coming on, providing that info. Thanks for sharing with us. It's been great having you, for sure.
It's great being here. I appreciate it.
And we'll have your links down below. So if anybody needs to reach out to you with questions, concerns, hopefully business, and get you hired on to their businesses and help them. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll be in the need of it too, hopefully.
Yep, absolutely. And if anybody just goes on Google and Google's Tom Applegarth Human Resources, my last name is unique enough that nobody else pops up.
That's great.
Awesome.
Ours is Smith, so you
Yeah.
can't Google us.
It's hard.
So,
Right.
Well, Tom, I appreciate your time and your insight onto HR and why it's important. So, and hope you have a great weekend and best of success to you.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.